As the 20th century wore on, the world became both a smaller and a more violent place. In 1914, tensions that had been simmering in Europe for decades erupted into full-scale war. New weapons, from submarines to mustard gas, made World War I the deadliest conflict in history up to that time. Milwaukeeans felt worlds away from the fighting at first. The United States was officially at peace, and life went on much as it had before. President Woodrow Wilson declared his nation neutral in fact as well as in name. But most Americans favored England, France, and their allies. For many Milwaukeeans, Germany and Austria were the home team, and Kaiser Wilhelm, the German emperor, was a hero. In 1916, the Milwaukee Auditorium was the scene of a week-long bazaar for the relief of German and Austrian war sufferers. The displays, raffles, and free-flowing beer attracted 175,000 people, nearly half the city's population. The Milwaukee Journal declared the bazaar the biggest thing ever attempted in Milwaukee. Only a year later, such open sympathy for the Germans would have seemed treasonous. Preparedness parades demonstrated the shift in America's mood. On April 6, 1917, the United States finally jumped into the conflict. The world, proclaimed President Wilson, must be made safe for democracy. The declaration of war had an electric impact on Milwaukee. Thousands of young men left home to fight the enemy over there. Milwaukee's own Billy Mitchell became one of the heroes. The grandson of pioneer tycoon Alexander Mitchell was placed in charge of the entire Allied Air Service, and he earned a promotion to general. Workers at home did their part for the war effort. Milwaukee's industrial output more than doubled during the conflict, and local firms turned out everything from ship gears to chipped beef. With manpower in short supply, woman power helped to make up the difference. War was good for business, but the economic boom proved to be an ethnic catastrophe. The most German city in America found itself in an all-out war with the Vaterland, and ties to the ancestral culture faded fast. As the propaganda machine kicked into high gear, Kaiser Bill was demonized as a butcher, and all Germans as bloody Huns. As the war dragged on in the trenches of Europe, the anti-German agitation at home degenerated into simple hysteria. Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms were banned from the concert stage. The German English Academy was rechristened Milwaukee University School. A number of Schneiders and Schmidts became tailors and smiths. Enrollment in the public schools' German classes dropped from 30,000 to a mere 400. Adults who tried to speak German in public were subjected to ridicule. The Deutscher Club, housed in Alexander Mitchell's old mansion, changed its name to the Wisconsin Club. Even the humblest foods were not spared by an ethnic cleansing. Sauerkraut was renamed Liberty Cabbage, and hamburger became Salisbury steak. World War I was just as hard on Milwaukee's socialists. In 1917, the National Party adopted a strident anti-war platform. Almost instantly, the party faded to obscurity, everywhere but its stronghold on Lake Michigan. Dan Hoan kept getting elected mayor. He faithfully discharged his duties to support the war effort, but he also found a novel application for his socialist principles. When Hone detected wartime profiteering in local grocery stores, he sold carloads of government surplus food to the public at cost. Congressman Victor Berger had a harder time. When his newspaper, the Milwaukee Leader, ran a series of anti-war editorials, federal officials banned it from the U.S. mails. They next went after Berger himself. In 1918, he was convicted of sedition for his editorial stands. Milwaukee voters were unmoved. They sent Berger back to Congress even after his trial. When the House refused to seat him, they elected him again by an even wider margin. World War I finally ended in November 1918 with a resounding victory for the Allies and a sigh of relief for the Socialists. Milwaukeeans, including German Milwaukeeans, shared in the general jubilation. But the city's anti-German fever refused to break. When the Pabst Theater tried to stage a German-language production 1 year after the war, super patriots aimed a cannon at the landmark and threatened to literally bring down the house. The show did not go on.
The anti-German witch hunt was almost laughable, but only in hindsight. Its impact on the city was deadly serious. Milwaukee had once been known as the German Athens, the cultural capital of German America. World War I brought those days to a quick and inglorious end. The entire community felt the loss. German art, German theater, and German music had long defined the city's high culture. Misplaced patriotism crippled them all, and Milwaukee's cultural progress was set back for decades. But there were still more losses to come.
Liquid refreshment had always been easy to find in Milwaukee. Before 1920, the city was the home of 9 breweries, 2,000 saloons, and a legendary public thirst. Prohibition ended all that. The ban on alcohol went into effect on July 1st, 1919, and the spigots were officially closed for 14 long years. A way of life had come to an end. Prohibition created special problems for the beer capital of America. Thousands of Milwaukeeans lost their jobs, and local breweries were forced into some rather bizarre lines of business. Gettleman made snowplows designed by the founder's son. Pabst turned out processed cheese, using milk supplied by the family's prize-winning dairy herds. Schlitz went into the candy business, producing a chocolate bar named for the Eline family that owned the brewery. Public support for Prohibition was practically non-existent in Milwaukee. The Great Experiment was widely considered an economic and social disaster. But Milwaukee never went dry. Dan Hone was a realist. "If I had the whole United States Army," the mayor declared, "I could not prevent illegal drinking. Prohibition is a big joke." The soft drink parlors listed in the city directory sold much more than strawberry phosphates. Suppliers of home brew and bathtub gin cropped up everywhere, and authorities couldn't begin to keep up with them. Hardware stores did a brisk business in build-it-yourself stills.
That's my grandfather, John Gerda, standing in front of the store. He and his wife, Mary, ran Gerda Hardware right here on 32nd and Lincoln for 50 years. When the store finally closed in 1964, there was an ample supply of copper kettles and metal tubing in the basement. Prohibition was in some ways the mildest of the blows that fell on Milwaukee during and after World War I. Before the war, Milwaukee had been America's capital of Germanism, socialism, and beer. Those were its hallmarks, the things that set the city apart. By 1920, Germans were on the run, socialists were endangered, and beer was illegal. Those losses made Milwaukee feel and act more like other American cities. Dan Hone had always promised what he called a better, bigger, and brighter Milwaukee. In the wake of World War I, it was blander as well.